Hello and welcome to your view with Jones Award. There's a lot that is happening, particularly across the continent of Africa. In recent times, we've seen many countries go through changes, particularly across the speaking French colonies. We've had coups d'etats in Mali, Burkina Faso, and also in Niger, which of course raised a lot of concerns, seeing as many of the countries on the continent practice democracy. But today we're going to look at Burkina Faso, as there's been many things said about the leader. Ibrahim Traore, who came into power through coup d'etat in 2022. Now, it received many condemnations, particularly from the regional body itself, ECOWAS, and also the West. However, he has also received many admiration across the globe, to the point where there's been economic growth in Burkina Faso. Now, amongst the youth, many have been very jubilant about what has been going on in Burkina Faso. So today's discussion is very simple. We're looking, is Burkina Faso's economic growth evidence that military regimes can also deliver developmental results, which is traditionally linked with democracies? And joining us to discuss this particular subject, we have Kofi Ali, who's an author and also ECOWAS citizens' rights advocate. We also have Julius Mbaluto, a journalist who has a weekly show on Colorful Radio. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the show. I think I'll come to you first, Julius. Ibrahim Traore, he's been dubbed as the second coming of Thomas Sankara, who was also former leader of Burkina Faso.
Indeed, as Jonas, I just want to actually even focus on the country, Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso, for those who don't know the meaning of Burkina Faso, is the land of the upright people. And that name came from two Burkina languages. Burkina from Mosi language, meaning integrity or upright. Faso from the Ola language, meaning father's house. What a fantastic name, the land of the upright people. And when you look into Thomas Sankara, what he represented and what he achieved in his short life, is definitely the illustration of that. We are talking about Traore right now. He's being seen as the current, Thomas Sankara because of his approach to politics, emphasizing independence of the country of Burkina Faso. Not without challenges, definitely, and not without threats, yes. For those who like chaos, to thrive in chaos, to trade and loot Africa, is not such a good fella. So, and also what you see inheriting is inheriting a country that has been within the region of Sahel region, predominantly known for like the land in Africa where terrorism or terrorists are pretty much active. Talk of Al-Qaeda and talk of all these other groupings within that land. So, but it's pretty much challenging situation, but so far he has achieved quite a lot. More than many. He's the youngest African president, but he has achieved more than presidents who are 3 times his age, and they're still in power without shame.
And Kofi, I guess my question to you will be the fact that you are pro-ECOWAS and the fact that Burkina Faso, including Mali and Niger, have withdrawn from ECOWAS. But I want you to focus, if you may, how Traore came into power and how he's been accepted now.
Thank you very much, Jules. Like you rightly started in your introduction of how I should look at the problem. I do not see Captain Traore as the solution to any problem, except that he has come on stage, though unlawfully, to prove that the laws, if they work, things will be better for everyone. We in ECOWAS have always said that we are not ready for military rule anymore. and that we want a stronger ECOWAS, because we can't see a future of coup and counter coup since Captain Traore took over. Endless night. I don't think the man even get time to sleep. He doesn't sleep. And when you have situation like this, we believe the problem of, they say it's terrorists, they say it's poverty, all these problems, the ECOWAS has not done enough to step in. In other words, the states are left on their own, which make the formation of the ECOWAS itself meaningless. Because if we can grow and develop ourselves, we now form the ECOWAS. So for me, Captain Traore, like I said, it's not here to solve any problem. It's just a matter of time. Bearing in mind that Burkina Faso, like Ghana, like Nigeria, were the creation of the Berlin Conference. And they were the creation of the European powers. And these people who created it, as long as we remain smaller states, we shall never be free. And unless you get freedom, you can never develop, because development comes after freedom. So this is where we are very, very religious in condemning any coup. Any coup. There's coup in Guinea. You might have forgotten to mention it. And on the African continent, there is a coup in Gabon. The Gabon man has now gone back to be democratic. The one in Guinea is still there, but still in ECOWAS. So the word Sahel, I don't know where it comes from. It's a word some people have coined just because they want to remove themselves from the ECOWAS. And leaving the ECOWAS, as some of us have said, it was done wrongfully, because ECOWAS is a legal entity. And that is not how Britain left the European Union.
But Kofi,
so
I just want to come in here because you made mention that Captain Ibrahim Traore is not the answer. But if you look at data, according to the IMF, Burkina Faso's economy is expected to remain robust in 2025, citing that the regime had made commendable progress. Also, the extreme poverty rate has fallen almost by 2% due to robust growth in the agriculture and service sector, according to the World Bank. So these are the same entities who oppose military regime, but at the same time looking at the policies implemented by Captain Ibrahim Traore and commending him. So I think the issue here is not necessarily about the ideological movement per se, but the actual person who's in post.
Yes, he assumed the role he's assuming. There are laws in Burkina Faso. Unless some of us want to say this democracy we have, how do I say, we are practicing, we don't know what we are doing. Unless we want to say, oh no, we don't want to do it, but somebody's forcing us to do it. So we don't know what we are doing. The man took over government, and the constitution of Burkina Faso itself, it is written that that act he carried out is a treasonable felony punishable by death. So we have a bandit in power, for God's sake. They're simple as ABC. So whatever good he does, to me personally and to us, because we even know that in ECOWAS, those who are managing the ECOWAS Commission, there are those who are sympathetic to military rule, which is sad. Very, very sad. So it means we are all not sure when you come to democracy. All right. That is what he's trying to say.
Okay, let's hear what Julius has to say.
I love the idea that my brother there is saying that Africa doesn't have freedom. I like the idea is that he's saying that Traore doesn't sleep, because the leadership that has been there in Africa always define Africa as a sleeping giant. And that's why this giant, while he's sleeping, dreams are lost, not found. We are talking about a continent whereby right now is still extremely dependent on the West, the entire continent, most of it dependent on the West. and remnants or leftovers of colonialism is still there in big way. Look at the West African, look at the French former colonies. How on earth do you even explain the idea that France will demand currencies of African countries, former colonies, to be deposited in their bank accounts? How do you explain that countries that have been set free by France as a former colonies, how do you explain that they still have to be paying billions of money of their hardly earned money? And look at the exploitation across the region. Look at the uranium in all these countries by the Western powers that be. There's no explanation for that. So where I stand from, I do not, never, and I never will endorse military takeover. No. But then you see, Jonas, the truth of the matter is that these democracies have been, actually they are the worst sleeping giants, and through them, while they are sleeping, immense corruption taking place, taking away dreams of citizens of different countries in Africa in the name of continuity, in the name of we have institutions. From where I stand, institutions must work. If they don't work, they lose meaning. They are toothless, just toothless lions. They don't have any effect. Let's analyze further. Let's look at, for example, AU. Did you know that AU still depends on donations also from these Western countries? When will Africa ever be independent, if that be the approach? So as much as we are saying there is no freedom, can I tell you something? Most of countries from Africa, they got their independence. Now, the freedom that is not there in Africa is in the hands of African leadership. So corruption means the elites keep on benefiting, enjoying their freedoms and the money. The poor remains down under. So that's the situation we have. So somehow Africa has to change. That kind of freedom, which doesn't equate to real freedom, has to end, whichever way you look at it.
Okay, Kofi, let me say this. I mean, based on what Julius has said, and Julius has said that although he's not in supportive of military rule, if we look at what Ibrahim has achieved, when he came in, automatically, companies in charge of Burkina Faso's gold, he has made a deal to the point where now 15% of that will go to Burkina Faso, which prior to him, Burkina Faso were receiving less than that. Also, he's looking to build a gold refinery. Plus, his anti-imperialism and anti-neocolonialism views has made him somebody that most youth, especially across the continent, are really in supportive of him. There's been this narrative that these so-called democratic leaders are puppets. And even when he spoke, I think it was a summit between Africa and Russia, these were some of his comments he's made there. I understand there's no such thing as a perfect system. And if perhaps this system is working, should we really condemn it?
Thank you very much.
Can I quickly?
Yes,
go
on. Yeah. Kofi.
On point to that. Jonas, what I wanted to say was the rising of Traore is the lack of any other better alternative. And can I also say, when a country is under subjugation, that country, people have to fight for their rights. These rights are fought for. They will manifest in different ways. Right now, what we see in Traore probably is what we saw in South Africa, Mandela being called a terrorist. Is what we saw in Northern Ireland, people like Jerry Adams and all those people who are fighting for the independence of Northern Ireland were being branded as terrorists. So freedom fighting sometimes can be branded as terrorism, depending on who is looking at it. So the actions of Traore, to me, that's the way I see it. Africa has to be freed, but how? There's no clear formula right now. But when I say I do not support military rulers or rulership, there could be better ways to that. But if that's the only way, what then?
Kofi?
I think I should have spoken before this time. It's unfortunate because we take speaking in turns. But quickly, let me make something very clear. Very, very clear. Democracy and leadership, we have to understand it properly. I think our understanding is based on the colonial definition of what we are doing. I strongly believe in that. When you talk about a democracy or you talk about leadership, we are not talking about medieval age. One strong man will come from the bush with some weapon and come and say, now I'm the leader of the people and I'm taking charge. When things are not right in the modern world, all your rights are rights by law. Like Ruto was saying recently, you say I should go. How do you want me to go? Is it by violence? Being lawless? We need to understand something very clear. We need to understand something very clear. What is clear here is that the way there are ways to take over or to come into government. And Captain Traore is not the only Burkinabe. Burkina Faso is made up of so many people. One man cannot come, and in a country where every day people are being arrested, executed, prosecuted, imprisoned, their family exorcised. We are saying that cannot go on. We are no more in the medieval age. Burkina Faso doesn't belong to one man, and there's no one man who will say he knows everything. People must learn to work together, and democracy gives us that opportunity. What we are saying is that the ECOWAS that we put in front, forget about the African Union, forget about the African continent. Yes, we are located on the African continent. That's not saying we should work together. We are working together because we are in the African Union. We meet there. But when you come to ECOWAS, you need to understand, we are saying something, ECOWAS at 50-something. It's wrong. We cannot have ECOWAS of presidents. You can do that in your African Union and say you are working together. We want to have ECOWAS of people as well. Just as we say, in Burkina Faso, there are human beings. How can you, in this day and age, one person to come and stand there and say, I have taken over power by the use of force, and I'm removing a country from a legal commitment, which is the ECOWAS? How does it make sense to anyone? It doesn't make sense. Listen, ECOWAS must be democratic. That is what we are saying. ECOWAS is not democratic because we need legislative laws for ECOWAS to work.
Okay, Kofi.
European Union has got that.
Let me interject here because you're saying ECOWAS must work, but at the end of the day, states are there to work in favor of its citizens, right? Now, a recent...
And ECOWAS is also there.
Of course, for its citizens, right? It's a regional...
In favor of citizens.
Right. Now, a 2024 survey in 39 countries across the African continent, which was conducted by the Afrobarometer, showed that there's been a drop in support for democracy across the continent of Africa. Now, although it remained most popular form of government, democracy has failed to give the youth of Africa hope for the future, and thus many people applauding the likes of Ibrahim Traore.
I think we are making a mistake, Jones. What is the meaning? What is the definition of democracy? In a country, let me give you an example. Britain, the head of state in Ghana, in Nigeria, is the president of Ghana and Nigeria. In United States, the head of state is the president. In Britain, the king is the head of state. But look at it this way. There is democracy in Britain because there is a legislative house, which is the parliament elected by the people like we have in Ghana. So you don't look at just the president and say you using the president to decide democratic. We are saying that in the ECOWAS, as unlike the European Union, we the people do not choose the legislatures. For how long? So there's no democracy in ECOWAS. That is what we are. So when you say democracy has failed, you have not actually understood what is democracy. Because if you understand, democracy will have failed in Ghana. Democracy will have failed in Burkina Faso. Democracy in ECOWAS does not exist. And ECOWAS is supposed to be a partner. We are called ECOWAS citizens and we pay tax to ECOWAS. Why are we citizens? Why do we pay tax if we are dummies? So what I'm trying to say here is that We are having a wrong interpret. If you go to the European Union, France, they vote for people to go to their parliament in France, Paris. They also vote for people to go to EU parliament directly on the basis of universal adult suffrage. Why are we not doing the same thing in ECOWAS?
Okay, so
that's the question.
No, I understand. I understand your view, but if that's what you're saying, then it's not down to the citizens per se. It's down to lack of political willingness, down to lack of leadership. And if this is what's going to continue, then the trajectory we're going to see is many countries following suit, the likes of Ibrahim Traore. Because if the leaders themselves do not want to practice democracy, then what do you think is going to happen, Kofi?
Remember, you don't want to be in Burkina Faso, my brother. In Togo, right now as I talk to you, Foreya Dema is sitting there. That is not going to anywhere. Can you look at it all? And he's even trying to go and join AES because that is where you have dictators. Why? Because nobody votes for a military ruler. Therefore, nobody will tell Foreya Dema leave. So what we are trying to say is that we should look at the solution to this problem. ECOWAS is to deal with so many things: issues of security, terrorism, trade, businesses, investment, development, farming, everything. This is what we are trying to say. The will of the people. You see, a lot of the change you see in the world today doesn't start by leaders. It starts by people like you and I. Yes, Jesus was not a leader. Muhammad was not a leader when they started. Moses was not even a proper leader. So what we are trying to tell you is that understand we are the voice. We want be the world you want to see. You don't sit down and say, oh, Muhammad is not interested in this. He has his own problem. So this is where our voices must be strong. And we should follow the ECOWAS into the room. Let's see what is happening there. Let's be part of our destiny. How can you remove almost 25 or 25 million people or 20 million people from ECOWAS without allowing the people to have even a say? In fact, they have people who are supposed to, from Burkina Faso parliament to go to ECOWAS parliament. They will not even ask anything. One man come with a gun. If somebody put a gun on you, how will you feel? Let him have what he wants.
Julius, I know you're itching to also get your voice heard.
I like the passion my brother there has. Yeah, I like the idea that he still believes the citizens of African countries have a voice in this dispensation, because those voices have been muzzled by the powers that be. When you talk about African Union, ECOWAS, or even East African Community, these voices don't matter so much when it comes to the political, elites who want to do whatever they want to do. These voices are always fighting, but the question is, are they heard? Who hears them? Who cares? You see, I'll give you an example. This is a very successful country known as Somaliland, and successive elections, peace, all these years, keeps on going to UN, trying to get recognition as a sovereign state, but it never happened. Neighboring countries, just like Sudan, they fought, broke into two. South Sudan was born, recognized as independent country. I could go to Ethiopia, fighting for a long time. The two countries broke into two. Eritrea was born. Why not Somaliland? And then there now you begin to understand the international politics, how it plays out. So we have our leaders mentally colonized by the West, and they would have nothing to do with it. When one of them makes a bit of noise, they are given rewards, they are given loans, and they are told, before your country pays off this, will have enjoyed enough and die, because it's gonna last maybe for 100 years or whatever. So the thing, what we need to wake up to in Africa is to understand the youth is the future, because they are the majority in Africa right now. And if that be the case, there has to be a way to speak to the powers that be in a way that they know they have to free their countries from colonial hold, from, like all these neo-colonialism tendencies, because global investors, in the name of investors, are looting Africa willy-nilly. And if that be the case, who is going to stop them? You see, it's better not to have leaders who are mentally colonized, and Africa can choose other leaders who can stand. Whether you brand them terrorists or whatever, what are institutions there for again? Because institutions are there to drive the wellness of their own people.
Yes.
The wellness of their own people.
The other day, I had a conversation with Kofi, and I hope you don't mind me bringing this up. And we were discussing this particular subject, and the issue of illegality came into the conversation, how Captain Ibrahim Traore went through illegal means to attain power. And my submission to Kofi then was, who created, Hamas? And then who created the Taliban? The Taliban were a group that were created by the US and were seen as somebody to advocate the US's advancement in the Middle East. However, all of a sudden they were named as a terrorist group. Now, this same terrorist group are actually the ones the US left Afghanistan for, to take over. So then the question is, does it really matter who you are or how you came to be in such position, provided you're doing the things that the country wants? And I bring it back to Burkina Faso, because majority of the people in Burkina Faso actually supports Ibrahim Traore. And if you read a lot of articles, is the fact that many young people have been let down by successive governments, by leaders, and hence people calling for these type of leadership. Back to ECOWAS, Kofi. ECOWAS is the regional body. Inasmuch as issues concerning the continent has to be dealt with a cooperation of the nations, every country has its own problems, right? So my question to you is, some may say, if perhaps Burkina Faso feels it is the right way to go and to remove itself completely from ECOWAS simply because of the position that it has taken, what is the big issue with that?
The big issue is that, you see, when the coup took place, right, in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and Guinea, unlike the Gambia, where ECOWAS was able to use the little resources we have to go there, like in Sierra Leone, there was a coup attempt recently. There was a coup attempt in Guinea-Bissau. So bear in mind, these coups and the military problems are coming up. If ECOWAS, remember, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and Guinea have been suspended from the ECOWAS. And we have sanctions placed on them. Remember that whoever put them there, because today we are happy, it's a man we like you saw in Sudan. Tomorrow it will be somebody we don't like. So we should not see this invisible hands by the curtain coming to put people there like Mobutu Sese Seko by the United States. West Africa is not a jungle, for God's sake. If we have a legislation, ECOWAS own legislation, by now our forces will have been in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. One of the problems we have in going in is that there was a coincidence between what ECOWAS want and what France want. And it looked like ECOWAS was working for France. ECOWAS was only saying that when this coup took place in Niger, the coup, right, ECOWAS doesn't recognize the coup because ECOWAS does not recognize military rulers. But there is a problem. France was also at that time mining uranium there. And France forces were there. And then France was saying they don't recognize the junta, but they recognize the what? The deposed president. And ECOWAS was also saying that we are going there to free the deposed president. We recognize him, which is exactly what the job of ECOWAS is supposed to be. We shouldn't fool ourselves. What was done by ECOWAS was absolutely right. See, we cannot continue with West Africa as a jungle. It can be in Sudan or Kenya. I don't really give a damn. But when you come to ECOWAS, we have legislation's mission. If ECOWAS has got a legislation, like European Union, by now we'll be printing our own currency. Because legislation means law. If legislation doesn't mean anything, why do we have parliament in Ghana? Why do we waste money on 276 people to one single place to go and sit down representing all part of Ghana? If it's meaningless. In Nigeria, there's a legislative house. In Sierra Leone, there is a legislative house. All the member countries have got the legislative institutions. ECOWAS itself does not have one. We should know what is wrong. So the problem here is you see, Captain Traore is only taking advantage. We've seen military rule. This is not the first one. Nobody will fool Kofi Ali that there is the man that come with gun has shot everyone down. And how can anyone come and say that people like him? Did you give the people? Even the devil have supporters. Why is it in Burkina? They are in France demonstrating. They are in Britain demonstrating. How many people can go to Ouagadougou and demonstrate that we disagree with what is going on without you being lined up and shot? What are we talking about here? It's a country where you can't even run a radio station that like the broadcast you are doing. You can't do it in Burkina. When last did you hear anyone from Burkina Faso on the internet?
Of course, Julius, what Kofi is talking about here is the opposite side of the coin, whereas when regimes take over, there is suppression on freedom of speech. You cannot criticize governments, and what could potentially happen to countries. We've seen what instability does to many countries. Multinational companies in some countries will just up sticks and leave. We've seen the downside of the impact of what coup d'etats tends to have on countries, looking at our recent history. In as much as Ibrahim Traore is somebody that is favored, this could potentially become a precedent for other countries. Now, other countries might also be in favor of what Ibrahim Traore is doing. But as Kofi said there, you never know who could potentially use it as an excuse, take advantage, and start exploiting the country even more than it was before.
Kofi there has a point. You also have a point. Just want to tell you that when this coup started, it was not even in one country. And I remember very well some countries in Africa, they had to quickly change their military rulers, their military arrangement for fear of being thrown. Rwanda being one of them and all that. You see, it's not like a template that you can say is the appropriate template for the rest of Africa without thinking about the consequences. Now, I'm aware, like even in May, talk about 130 people being killed by government of Traore, talking about the Fulanis there, talking about that, but the government of Traore sees it in a different way. If you remember the Sahel region, what it was known for, like hotspot or the home where all these terror groups were, or Al Qaeda and others. And therefore, from their point, like they defend themselves, saying that they were fighting terrorism. So leftovers of terrorism are there. Threat from terror is still there because Traore's taking over doesn't mean it went away. Remember, these countries had to be helped by French forces in order to fight terrorism and all that. So as I said earlier, there are challenges that were there. And they'll continue to be. But who do you believe? You see, as a academic media student, there's what we call communication, ethics of communication. And in every story that is told, you need to ask yourself who is saying what. I'll give you a pretty good example. Gulf War 1991, the first time America went to bomb Iraq to free Kuwait. Shall I even surprise you? There was talk about smart missiles, that Jonas, if we are having a cup of tea in Peckham, me and you, smart missile is sent to you, it will come and hit you and leave me alone. Right?
Yeah.
But now how that used to work, Jonas, every CNN journalist had to have about 2 soldiers to monitor what they have to report. These journalists were sitting in offices, and it's all high-tech and digital representation of that. Down on the ground, there was an independent journalist who was covering independent of that arrangement. And you see, like, yeah, smart missile, but when it landed on a marketplace, it cleared everything, building, women selling mangoes, children running on the streets. So there was nothing smart about smart missiles. So what I'm using that example to bring it to Burkina Faso. You will find out that people love freedom. People think that Burkina Faso and the Traore is independent. They are enthusiastic about the government of Traore. But the Western countries, their propaganda through the media will definitely have to demonize the character of Traore. But the truth is, if you were Traore, dangers come from the Western countries that you have stopped from looting your country. Dangers come from those within your country who could be bribed and become sellouts and kill you as well. Dangers are there. So who do we believe?
Okay. Briefly, guys, I just want us to just move into this arena. I know that we're really, really short for time, because I believe that this what's happening in Burkina Faso is actually deeper than we've talked about here, because we also know that Burkina Faso has formed a close allegiance or alliance with Russia. Of course, when it comes to the West and Russia, these are two superpowers. And I just want to touch upon, I want you guys to touch upon that, Kofi Ali, how that is seen. Is it deeper, or is it just, business as usual of a country that has seen a lot of poverty and such needed a revolutionary, which prompted the likes of Ibrahim Traore to take power?
You see, we need to be able to look at the background of everything. I've always repeated, Burkina Faso is a creation and therefore the colony of France. Like a mother and her baby. Taking the baby away will be very difficult. I recalled when Kwame Nkrumah was the president of Ghana, after the independence, and he started getting closer to the Soviet Union, the British became very, very uncomfortable. And that is part of the reason why he was overthrown. Now, France will always be very, very uncomfortable to hear that Burkina Faso is getting too close to Russia. And the Russians are looking for alliances on the African continent. So it's another power coming in. When you take Burkina Faso into Russia, Russia has got about 40 to 50 republics inside that are just as good as the countries on the continent of Africa. The only difference is that, like United States of America, they have a central authority. Now, India, China, and to some extent Brazil, they are all working with Russia. And they are working as equals. What I mean, size for size, technology for technology. Even in the dark days of China, they really, really work very closely with Russia to get to where they are today. However, when you come to the case of Burkina Faso, a just tiny little country, for God's sake, in the middle of nowhere. So here we are saying that there can never be any association or kind of relationship, leaving one colonizer to go to another colonizer. What is the point? Why do you want to leave? Because you can't tell me Putin and Captain Traore are the same. Putin is a man that brings all the 50 countries of African continent to come and have a meeting with him alone. Can Ibrahim Traore try that? He can't even bring 3 countries together. So this is what we are saying. Let us look inward for the solution to our problem. And this is why we created back to the ECOWAS. This is why we created the OAU. This is why we have the African Union. This is how we have SADC. This is why we have the East African Economic Community. These institutions are created to give us that platform that will allow us to deal with either former colonizers. America states were created by the British Empire. Today they work together. But you can see where United States of American interest is, where the British interest is, and then there's European Union too. They are working. How can EU 27 come together against Sierra Leone alone? How can because right now, the problem you are seeing with Captain Traore is not Captain Traore against France. It's Captain Traore against Burkina Faso against EU 27 countries. What kind of relationship is this?
All right.
So
let's bring in Julius.
ECOWAS, from the point of these countries that recently went through military coup, ECOWAS' role was not a solution for them. Because number one, they saw these ECOWAS ready to send troops to come and restore the former overthrown presidents. Those presidents were overthrown by their own people because they were seen as sellouts, as collaborators, as people who were pro-West, and the West was harvesting, looting in Africa and taking everything. So when you look into that alone, it explains what these three countries had to do. Remember, when the first country was threatened, the other countries left ECOWAS and stood together, and then they were like, any military force from ECOWAS, we are gonna gang up, the three of us, and defend each country. So when you look at that dynamic, why is that the case? Is because ECOWAS was not delivering. Look at it under Nigeria, and President of Nigeria, Tinubu was the man to lead that, and is coming back at the back of controversial election whereby he didn't have full legitimacy. Nigerians were claiming he was not elected properly, and he's the one now to talk and control ECOWAS, where ECOWAS goes. So you see, shall I say this, and it's very important for Africans to understand, gone is the era of hiding information. We are living in at a time, today's generation in Africa, pretty informed, pretty critical, pretty quickly analyzing what's going on and seeing what's going wrong. So actually, can I say this today? This generation across Africa is unstoppable. So those powers that be, wherever they are in Africa, you better learn how to contend with this generation. These are the people who see what's going wrong, what has been going wrong, and they're like, this thing is not working. And it's a generation which wants quick solutions. We call it over the counter quick, meal being ordered. And that's the way they are living. You don't offer solutions.
Julius, Julius, I just want you to touch briefly.
I was coming to. So when you look into the dynamics of Africa and where we go, of course, under the dynamics of France being former colonial power, you saw what happened in some countries, the soldiers from France being kicked out by even ordinary people. When you saw that happen, he told you, he's just saying that no confidence, nothing. Now, that's a beginning, because you realize that each country would like to be an ally from some powerful force. Why Russia, China, and the current BRICS group of nations comes into place? Because number one, there is no former Chinese colony in Africa that is known. Russia is not a former colony in Africa. They never colonized any country in Africa. But when we talk about Portuguese, talk about the British, talk about the French, they colonized Africa. And therefore, it's like, these guys are good. They never colonized us. You can work with them because the history is not so murky.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll continue the discussion. We'll bring the show to an end. We say thank you to Kofi Ali, who is ECOWAS Citizens' Rights Advocate and also an author, and Julius Baluto. Julius is a journalist who hosts a weekly show on Colorful Radio. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been fascinating. We'll keep the conversation going, and we'll meet again next time. It's goodbye from us.